Hi, I'm Scott for ediblemusic.com. I was meeting with some students the other day, and we were sharing our favorite mixes that have come out recently. And of course, they all sounded very different from one another. Different genres, different musicians, different mixing engineers. And we all have different favorite mixes, depending upon the kind of music that we work on, the kind of music that we like. So we came upon this problem that I'd like to talk about today, which is what can you learn that is in common between all of these great sounding songs and incorporate them into your own mixing practices. There are a few things that I'd like to talk about. The last one, though, is one that you'll really like and already have. It's taste. Let's get the first one out of the way, the big one, which is experience. Something that I don't think is as important as it sounds. Because even if a mixing engineer has been doing it for 20 years and you really admire their work, that doesn't mean that they were always great. And on the flip side, I'm sure that your first mix could sound really, really good if you spent the time on it. But the aspect of experience that I actually mean here is just in terms of the tools that a mixing engineer surrounds themselves with. Mixing engineers used to work on these big desks with racks of hardware around them. In a sense, they were limited to using those particular tools that they had on hand. We, on the other hand, have so many options for how we want to mix and produce our music, which I think can sometimes be a negative because we start to search for something else if this one particular tool is not giving us what we need from it. But then you start sort of getting into this alternative mindset of searching for things instead of focusing on the mix and what you actually initially needed that tool to do for you. So I think, in fact, it's useful for you to limit yourself, even if it's artificial, as it is when we're working with plugins, to only a few select, say, a few reverbs, a few EQ plugins, a few different compressors and saturators, and really, really get to know those and make them work for you as much as possible. It's sort of an artificial way of creating a studio for yourself where you are then able to learn and master each of these tools. And once you've got that, say for example, if you're just using the stock tools in your workstation, once you've figured out how to get those sounding really, really great, that means you know how to use a compressor, you know how to work with saturation, and you can EQ anything in the world. So I think it can be very helpful to limit yourself to the stock plugins, for example. Really, really get to know those so that once you start using other plugins and other effects, maybe you start purchasing your own hardware units as well. It will change from being a question of how can this save me to how can this be useful to what I need to do. And that, I think, models the experience that mixing engineers used to have in the past of working on a big desk and having racks of hardware surrounding them. That kind of limitation was a really productive thing because it would mean that, okay, if I need to compress something, if I need to compress my drums, I'm going to send it to this compressor every time on every mix because this is the studio that they have to make use of. Thinking about this in terms of workflow is also really useful in establishing the different stages of music production, particularly if you're working on your own songs. I think that it is important to remind yourself that your favorite mixing engineer usually has an assistant or several assistants, and those assistants do crucial work that is, in a good way, is separate from the actual mixing process. Things like editing and comping and cleaning things up and getting the initial balances right so that by the time it does come in front of the actual mixing engineer, not the actual one, of course, but the one who has been hired, so that when it comes to that next stage, it's ready to go and you can just work on getting a great balance instead of having to clear out room sound or getting rid of resonant frequencies. So it's very useful to divide the process of song production and mixing and mastering into different phases. And of course, there are always exceptions. You know, when you're writing a song, you could be recording it a little bit at a time, or producing and kind of mixing a little bit at a time. But going back to what I said about experience, in order to do that most effectively and most efficiently, it's good to have that foundation of mastery so that you can explore things in ways that keep the song in motion and keep it going. So if you're working on your own music, I think it will be really worth your while to get the writing and recording down, then have a separate phase of editing and cleanup if you need it. And then you can get into the mixing stage ready just to focus on balancing. It helps to, in your mind at least, to know that you have finalized the writing stage, that you finalized the recording and production stage. And then, of course, you will have finalized the mixing stage as well. Those two so far, experience and hats, are all about workflow and ensuring that your mixing practice is as efficient and creative as possible without the stress that mixing can often produce, because it's hard. The thing that I find about the amazing technology that we have now, where we can record and mix and release our songs all by ourselves, is amazing, but it loses the tradition that your favorite mixing engineers will have come from, which is mentorship. And it's really useful to have someone to consult with when you're learning how to mix, when you're getting better at mixing. Someone who will kind of nudge you in a particular direction about where you can make some improvements. It's all you, of course. It's your work, and you get to make things sound exactly how you want them to. That's where your taste comes in. But it's very useful, I find, to have a community or a person who has the skills and knowledge and temperament to help you along the way as you're getting better. Pretty much every single one of your favorite mixing engineers is going to be very gracious about their own mentor and what they have learned from them. And they also continue with other mentoring relationships as their careers grow. You don't really get that when you're just working alone in your home studio. And that, I find, is a really crucial relationship. As I mentioned, pretty much every single one of your favorite mixing engineers will graciously cite their own mentors or a series of mentors that they've had. And they also continue with other mentoring relationships as their careers grow in different stages, and they'll pick up different skills and learn new things. And that's something that that you should devote yourself to as well. Those things all combine, I think, with taste. The question is, how do you take those practical components of workflow and experience and mentoring relationships, and then taking those and gathering them into your taste of mixing production so that you can have something that also sounds great, just as the student discussion that we had, but will also sound different, and it will be loved because of that difference. They all come together in a really wonderful way. Because how good a mix is up to you, ultimately, but with the foundational skill sets that you will have developed through experience, the mentorship that you'll have received, and your adeptness and flexibility with the different stages of making and releasing a song will let your taste just flow throughout it, and you won't have to fight with the tools that you're working with. And it will feel fun and enjoyable. And you'll be able to get songs that have clarity and groove and power, in ways that don't feel as though it's some secret that you need to uncover with a particular plugin setting. It's something that you will know how to achieve and accomplish. Taste is all about figuring out how to combine the numbers and settings with the sonic quality of the song and the art of the song. I think that's one of the really exciting aspects about the craft of mixing, which is that it feels magical. It really does. But it's also derived from very specific decisions and techniques. It's a matter of developing it within yourself, which is really exciting. And I hope that you're excited about that too. So these are the ways to get there: experience, workflow, mentorship, and taste. And that's what we're all about here at Edible Music. That's how you get it done. So don't do it by yourself. Let's do it together.